They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
All right, guys, we have so much to cover. I saw a tweet from Woj saying that this was the most action we have ever had at the NBA trade deadline. And obviously in fantasy basketball, it's a little bit different than some other fantasy sports where we know that there are going to be a certain amount of minutes played every single night. It doesn't matter what the team is. It doesn't matter what the situation is. When there are minutes to be played, there are fantasy basketball points to be scored. And there are only so many minutes. There are only so many buckets to go around. So there's going to be a ton of moving variables when we're trying to evaluate some of these players going forward. So for this video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through and I'm going to be talking about 6 or 7 guys that I actually think were helped at the NBA trade deadline, where their roles are either going to be safe or maybe get a little bit larger on the offense that they're going to. And then tomorrow, I will be talking about the biggest losers and what to expect with how far they're going to be dropping down with their minutes played, with their field goal attempts, with their possibility for assist. So of course, if you're not already, I have no idea why, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, hit that notification bell next to the subscribe button. That way, whenever we premiere the video, you can come out, you can watch it live with us. I can answer your questions during the premiere. And yeah, we've just been having a ton of fun with those premieres as of late. But anyway, let's dive into this video. And the first player we are going to start it off with is, I'm going to be honest, someone that I messed up on because we were having so many questions in the premieres about him. And I was kind of overlooking it, not necessarily paying too much attention, not necessarily taking it as serious as I should have, because we kind of knew Victor Oladipo was going to get traded. But this is Kevin Porter Jr., who has been a very hot conversation topic over the past few weeks. And with Kevin Porter Jr., what I want to be doing is I want to be going over to a website that I love to use. Well, honestly, probably my favorite fantasy basketball website to do research on is #basketball.com. I believe that's their name. This is not an ad or anything, but I'm getting projections from somewhere, and I want to be completely transparent with where I'm getting these projections in case y'all want to go out there and look at them for yourselves. But anyway, here, when we're pulling up one of our favorite basketball websites, honestly, I think they're being a little bit conservative with the Kevin Porter Jr. projections, because we know that a ton of minutes are going to be opening up without Victor Oladipo. Victor Oladipo was up at like 36 minutes a game over the past 30 days. And yes, this was probably because the Rockets were trying to make him look as appealing as possible, just for any fan base, for any general manager trading for him. That way they could possibly squeeze out an extra pick swap. That way they could get any extra juice, because we know they aren't really playing for anything. But with Kevin Porter Jr., he's going to do a great job of picking up some of what was going to be in that role. And I know a lot of people want to look at his efficiency metrics, and a lot of people want to look at the overall situation in Houston and go, hey, for category formats where my free throw percentage, for where my field goal percentage matters a lot, I just kind of want to be avoiding this overall situation. And that's a fair point. I'm not going to argue with anybody on that. I think that if you want to look at Houston and go, you know what, the efficiency is going to be so poor that I don't want to load up on anybody here given these formats, sure. But if you're playing in a points league, I think that Kevin Porter Jr. and his projected 32 minutes a game for the rest of the season is now going to be someone that is consistently making your lineup on a week-to-week basis. Now, if we look at these projections by #FantasyBasketball, they actually have him down there at 53% from the field and 74% from the free throw line. Now, yes, these are their projections for the rest of the year. Now, if we switch this over and we look at what has actually happened over the past 30 days, these numbers are kind of a little bit worse. I'm going to be completely honest. He's down there at 42% from the field and 65% from the free throw line. But we also know that's not with as much volume as he should be seeing. So I think Kevin Porter Jr. is probably going to regress to the mean a little bit in that area. And he's also someone that has been putting up a decent amount of field goal attempts per minute played. And if we slide over real quick and look at what Victor Oladipo was actually doing in Houston over the past 30 days, Victor Oladipo was putting up over 20 field goal attempts a game. So there's just going to be so much production to go around, so many shots to be taken in this Houston Rockets offense that I think you have to. I mean, it's not possible to ignore the fact that Kevin Porter Jr. is going to be a riser. Okay, now with this same tune, let's go over And let's pull up Jason Tate, a player that has so much positional flexibility that he is definitely going to be a guy that's easy to fit into your starting lineup. And we know that here it's a little bit of a different story where you're not going to be expecting the volume with the amount of field goal attempts to go drastically up like we are going to be with a Kevin Porter Jr. But what we are going to be seeing is we are just going to be seeing more minutes available in this offense. I know a lot of people want to look at a Kelly Olynyk coming in and going, Mason, what if he's going to take some away from the 4? Because we know Christian Wood is going to be playing a little bit more of the 5 for this rotation. And I really don't care. I think that Tate is going to be an option that's decent regardless of if you're playing a points league or a category league. Now, not going to sit here and act like he has some extremely high ceiling. Obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, best case scenario here with Tate is he's someone that possibly picks you up an extra win, just hopefully anywhere, regardless of if that's in a single category, regardless of if that's pushing you over the edge, just 1 week left in your fantasy basketball regular season. But he's someone now that we are looking at going, you know what, he should be a decent rotational piece for those regular formats. If you're playing in a 6 or an 18-team league, then obviously you're probably not that interested in Tate, but that's not for those formats. Okay, so now let's talk about a player that we have been talking about for a long time now. I was listing him as a buy low once we got news of the Aaron Gordon trade. And this is going to be Terrence Ross, where if we go over to Orlando right now, I mean, it's going to be a very similar situation to Houston, where, yes, the efficiency across the board is going to be disgusting for this team because they are just lacking of overall talent. They really don't have that much to look at as they have so many injuries across the roster. They're on full-on tank mode, trading away 3 of their studs in Vucevic, in Aaron Gordon, and Evan Fournier. I swear to God, they've had those players for like a decade now. They're finally deciding to go in one direction. And if we pull up a real quick hashtag fantasy basketball's projections for the rest of the year, I think that this is a case where they're straight up wrong on Terrence Ross. They have him only projected to play 29 minutes a game over the rest of the season. Now, I don't understand how that's possible. You look at the other players on this team. I mean, Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, Michael Carter-Williams, Otto Porter Jr. I mean, how many minutes are you going to be giving these guys? We know that there are also injuries with multiple of these players. Terrence Ross himself is dealing with an injury currently. But it doesn't really matter when you know that per minute played, he is going to be putting up so many shots that he's going to have a decent output for those fantasy points leagues. That's going to be the number one place that I'm looking for him. And this is a common trend. I mean, if you're targeting a player on a bad NBA offense, you want to make sure that they're on a points league. You want to make sure that you're not playing in a category league because generally you're going to end up seeing the field goal percentage be a lot lower. All right, so now let's stay with this Orlando Magic team, as we know that there are so many minutes to be had. There are so many rebounds. There are so many field goal attempts to be had. And let's go over to someone with, in my opinion, actually a lot of upside. It's going to be Wendell Carter Jr., who's traded from Chicago. We know a player that, yes, has his faults, but I believe the upside is there. And he is coming into a situation without Vucevic that this team kind of needs a big man to be playing. Now, I love Mo Bamba. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I go to the University of Texas. Mo Bamba and I were both freshmen at the same time. I saw him around at sports bars. I saw Mo Bamba everywhere. He definitely doesn't know who I am, but I'd be sneaking pictures with him, like when he wasn't paying attention. Anyway, I love the fit for Wendell Carter Jr. here. For someone to slide in, for someone to play over 30 minutes a game. And yes, you don't necessarily like the fact that there are so many field goal attempts to be had, just because we know Wendell Carter Jr. going to be selective with those shots regardless, so it would be a surprise to see him over 11 field goal attempts per game. But you love the fact that he should be efficient with those shots. We know he's not going to be shooting anything from beyond the arc. We know that he's not necessarily going to be a major factor in the mid-range. He's going to be more so that player at the basket, kind of like a poor man's DeAndre Ayton. I mean, racking up points where he can, also getting rebounds and decent defensive statistics. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him come away with a steal and a block per game. So Wendell Carter Jr., someone that I am going to like. All right, so now let's go over to our last team. We're going to cover 2 players from this team. This is going to be the Toronto Raptors. And the first guy I want to talk about is going to be Kyle Lowry, someone that I for sure thought was going to be traded. I mean, Kyle Lowry was like crying the day before the trade deadline. thought he was saying goodbye to the Tampa Bay fans, but ends up staying with the team surprisingly. And I've been on record saying that Kyle Lowry was a sell for me earlier this season because I thought that he was going to get moved. I thought that he was going to be traded away from the Toronto Raptors and play a little bit more of a role player style. I did not think that he was going to be going to a team that was going to be relying on him for production. But I think his role remains the same in Toronto. We go over and look at what hashtag fantasy basketball has him projected for. They have him for 34 minutes, 2.5 threes, 17.5 points. More importantly, over 5 rebounds a game, 6.5 assists a game. And we know that he's also going to be coming through with steals. You never even have to worry about that. And if we look at what he's provided you over the past 30 days, I mean, kind of similar to what we were seeing with these projections, the assists are way up. And over the past 30 days, he has averaged 9.5 assists a game, up there at that 2.5 threes, 17 points. The free throw percentage is very high, but he's not getting to the line too much, so it's not going to make that big of a difference. Now, I will say this. I think hashtag fantasy basketball is probably a little bit off with their expected field goal percentage for Kyle Lowry. Over the past 30 days, it's down there at 41%. And this Raptors team, not the best. Kyle Lowry, I believe he's 35 years old now, so not going to be expecting him to be a player that can drastically improve this as the year goes on. I think that this is kind of who Kyle Lowry is, but the volume should definitely be a lot higher in Toronto/Tampa than we would have seen elsewhere. Okay, so now let's go over to another player that over the past 30 days has actually been very productive on a per minute basis. And this is going to be Chris Boucher, who right now, over the past 30 days, averaged 24.5 minutes a night. But the points per game were actually very high considering this lack of minutes, where he was up there at 15 points a game off of decent efficiency, off of 53% from the field, 77% from the free throw line, as well as averaging a little over 6 rebounds a game and 2 blocks. And the reason that we are going to be having a bump up for him is just there are going to be more minutes available in this rotation. And I know a lot of people want to say, but Mason, Norman Powell, and Chris Boucher don't necessarily play the same exact position. I think you want to be a little bit more excited about OG Anunoby. And yeah, that's a completely fair point. I think that you can look at OG Anunoby and say that he is a massive winner. Here, I don't want to talk about him directly, though, because we understand that that's obvious. Everybody in this premiere is going to be screaming that right now, so we don't need to focus too much in on it. I want to focus a little bit more on a player that I think is going to be a little under the radar in Chris Boucher. And we just know that when a player leaves a rotation like a Norman Powell, and whenever he is going to end up going to Portland, he's going to be sacrificing a lot of minutes. He's going to be leaving 35 minutes available in this Toronto rotation. And the players going back over to Toronto are pretty much a poor man's version of Norman Powell. So instead of them just directly sliding in those players into those roles, I think what we are going to see from Toronto is just a little bit of a change in identity, a little bit of them deciding to go, hey, you know what? We're already pretty small with Fred VanVleet as well as Kyle Lowry out on the court at the same time. Might as well play Chris Boucher, someone who's been very productive on the minutes he's had, and Pascal Siakam a little bit more at the same time. Maybe play OG Anunoby at that 3 a little bit more, and I think that would be a great fit. And if we are just seeing more minutes available in this rotation, I think you have to say Chris Boucher is going to be a winner. Okay, now thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. Of course, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow.